one of the big radio show for Tuesday. Your big day for truth and justice in the American way, or something like that. It's all good, and thank you for coming in and joining us this morning here on the big radio show. Tuesdays means we're joined by Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, who comes in to give us the full rundown and the dope on all the stuff that he sees going on in the state of Alaska, usually from a monetary oil and gas standpoint, from a governance, and of course from a budget standpoint, since he is the director of the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets cadre. He comes in every morning to give us that. We're about to jump into the weekly top three here in just a minute. Then in hour two, usually I do a recap with some of the things that really stuck out with me for the weekly top three and give you some of my thoughts that I hadn't shared with Brad at that point. And then we finish up, as always, with our friend Chris Story, who comes in for a dose of much needed positivity at the very end to try and, salve our wounds from the whole thing, because sometimes truth hurts, man. Sometimes truth hurts, and it's never fun. But Chris here comes in and just kind of calms us down a little bit, and that's what we have to look forward to this morning. All right, we're ready to go. Brad Keithley waiting in the wings, so let's just get to it, shall we, and get things started. Brad Keithley, again, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, to come in and tell us about those same sustainable budgets. We hope that's what it's all about. Good morning, Brad. How are you?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How's Homer today?
It's never a bad day in Homer. That's all I'm saying. Doesn't matter what's going on. It's never a bad day in Homer. Current temperature's 37 degrees. So I'm loving it. And it's all good right now. I mean, you'd say it's not 80, but that's okay. I can live with it. I love it. And snow's going away, and it's good stuff.
Just put on a sweatshirt and you're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. I was down on the spit yesterday, enjoying a little bit of that fresh sea air and letting the dog run free. And it was, it's a good day. It's a good day. Let me just put it that way.
Good.
So Brad, we got some things to discuss this morning, and we're going to talk a little bit. There's been a lot of movement here in the legislature over the last few days. Of course, we had the passing of the Senate education, and then the sending it back, and the governor now has vetoed it. And today they're supposed to have an attempt to override it. But we've also got PF the new permanent fund correction or corporation projections and stuff. So tell us, what are we at here with number one?
So I'm not going to talk about the veto today because it's either going to be sustained or not by the end of the day, and there's really not that much to say about it. I suspect it won't. I suspect it won't be sustained.
Yeah, exactly.
But I want to talk about the permanent fund corporation and this continuing effort by the permanent fund corporation to substantially change the constitutional provision regarding the permanent fund to merge the two account fund that's established by the corporation, or established by the Constitution, the corpus and the earnings reserve. The permanent fund corporation's proposal to merge those two together into a single fund. And I continue to be troubled by that. I continue to do numbers on that, and I continue to try to understand what's really going on with the permanent fund corporation, their earnings, and what the motivation is behind, or what the effect of motivation also, but what the effect of merging those two accounts would be. Because I oppose it. I think it's bad, but I really want to understand what's going on. Monthly, the permanent fund corporation publishes a number of reports. One of them is their financial statement for the month. That shows, what they've gained, what they've lost, what they've contributed to the general fund in terms of the POMV draw, what they've received in from their share of royalties, the permanent fund's share of state royalties, and then the financial financial statement for the month is pretty interesting, and we do a couple of charts based on that. Several charts actually based on that each month. They also publish, the Permanent Fund Corporation also publishes what they call history and projections each month. And that takes a look back at the earnings and the draws that have been made on the permanent fund. It looks at the gains and the losses in the permanent fund from a backwards perspective, and then sort of a projection forward, not only for the current fiscal year, but also for the 10 years forward, plus or minus. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But for the projection forward for a number of years about where they see the permanent fund going. And this month, I spent a lot of time looking at the history and projections and trying to understand exactly what their cash flow is and what their obligations are, as well as what their cash flow in is. Tried to sum it up in a chart, and if you snagged that chart and control, oh my God, Michael, you were sitting there, weren't you, with your finger ready to go?
You're on the finger on the trigger, ready to
go. All right, so this month I summed it up in a chart, and this is based upon the history and projections that the permanent fund is given for the as of March. They do it in arrears, so it's history up to March. And then it's projections from March forward. And for those on the radio, the chart really it has 3 lines on it. Well, 2 lines and a bar on it. The 2 lines are the statutory net income, which is basically the cash flow into the permanent fund, except for their share of royalties, the royalty deposit that the state is making. Cash flow in from interest, from dividends, cash dividends that have been declared, sales, cash they've made on stock sales or asset sales during the period. And so it's cash in. And the red line, and then we've got a red line on there essentially for cash out. And that is the POMV draw that's being distributed to the state under the POMV statute, plus inflation proofing, which is the portion of the earnings reserve that is being transferred back or projected to be transferred back to the corpus to compensate for inflation. So the red line is the combination of those two, and the bar at the bottom is a calculation of what the difference between cash in, the SNI, statutory net income, cash in, what the difference is between cash in and cash out, the POMV draw plus the inflation proofing that goes back to the corpus. And what you see on there, and I start the chart in FY19, which is the first year of the POMV draw. So because we're calculating the effect of the POMV draw and we're calculating the effect of inflation proofing, I started the first year of the POMV draw. And what you see there is from FY19 through FY24, which is the history part of this. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. In those 6 years, the cash in, the statutory net income has exceeded the cash out only 1 year of those 6 years. In the other 6 years, the cash in has been less than the cash out, has been less than the POMV draw plus inflation proofing. And I
don't want to, I need to dumb this down because I haven't had all my coffee this morning for most people. But what you're saying is over the last 6 years, in only 1 year, did the earnings reserve make enough money to actually fund the 5% POMV draw?
Plus inflation proofing. Plus
right.
Plus inflation.
In only 1 year out of the last 6 since we started this, have we had enough money to actually cover the draw?
Right. So the difference in that has been covered by, in the case of up to 24, it's been covered by drawing down the accumulated earnings reserve that had built up from prior years. And so there's been a reserve in the earnings reserve from cash in exceeding cash out. Statutory net income exceeding cash out. There's been a reserve that's built up in the prior years, and so what they've been riding on for the last 6 years is that built up reserve that existed prior to that time. Now, keep in mind that reserve got depleted by $8 billion and over as a result of two $4 billion ad hoc draws that were made off from the earnings reserve transfers into the permanent fund corpus. So that reserve isn't very big anymore. But what they've been riding on over those last 4 years the last 6 years rather, is the reserve that built up. Going forward, this is the shocking part. Going forward, this is the Permanent Fund Corporation's own projection. Going forward, the permanent fund projects that the cash out, the POMV plus inflation proofing, will exceed earnings in every year through the remainder of the projection period, which is a 10-year projection period through FY34. So you see red bars, which is the difference between the cash out and the cash in, red bars every year on out through the remainder of the projection period. And when they talk about depleting the earnings reserve, that's what they're talking about. I mean, they're talking about depleting all of the reserves that have been built up to this point that they've been writing down through the last 6 years. And they're talking about writing those out basically through the remaining 10 years. There's a lot of problems with this, but the what this is essentially saying is we're not earning enough cash into the earnings reserve. We're not earning enough cash into the permanent fund. The permanent fund isn't generating enough earnings to cover the 5% POMV draw plus the deposit for inflation proofing that the statute requires that they're supposed to make. So where's the difference going to be made up? I mean, once we go through all the accumulated earnings reserve that we've been drawing on the last 6 years, and we'll draw on a couple of more years, where are they going to make up this difference? And the difference, there's two other sources of income to the permanent fund that you would have to use to cover once the earnings reserve, the accumulated earnings reserve, is drawn down. Two other sources of income you'd have to use to cover. One is the deposit that's coming from royalties. I mean, there's a quarter of the royalties are supposed to be deposited into the permanent fund, and they're supposed to be used to build up the permanent fund, make the permanent fund permanent over time, build up this corpus that's generating the earnings. One is that, and that's eating your seed corn. I mean, you've used this phrase before, and it's very appropriate here to count on using the permanent fund share of royalties to cover the POMV draw. You're essentially just recycling royalties that are supposed to be put into the permanent fund. You're recycling those into the general fund if you use those. The other is the unrealized gains that the permanent fund has built up. Now, unrealized gains are the gains you realize out of stock. Let's say you bought stock at 100 and the market price now is 110. So you had a gain of 10. That's unrealized it's realized if you sell the stock and take the 10 as profit. It's unrealized if you hold the stock and it tells you you've made 10, but you haven't traded it into cash yet. The permanent fund has always told us that it's holding that stock. It has unrealized gains because it anticipates that stock is going to go even higher, that there's a value to holding the stock as opposed to cashing it out, because there's additional appreciation that's going to go on in that stock or on in the asset or whatever is represents the unrealized gain. There's additional gain that's going to come out of that, and you don't want to cash it too early. You want to keep riding that gain on up, and so you don't want to cash out. But what this is telling you is you're going to have to come up with some additional source to realize that cash gap that's in there. So what this really tells me is one of two things is going on. Either the 5% draw that we've projected for the permanent fund is too high. We can't support it. The only way we're going to be able to support it is to start writing down start either converting the share of royalties that's coming in to cash out, essentially recirculating them to the general fund, or we're going to have to start, doing something with respect to the unrealized gains. And so we're either the 5% is too high, or what I really think is going on is the permanent fund isn't earning enough.
Right.
It isn't earning enough to cover the cash obligations, to cover the obligations that it's built for itself. And when you compare this, we've talked about this in a prior segment, when you compare the permanent fund earnings to the S&P earnings, for example, the permanent fund is way deficient compared to the S&P. We would have a permanent fund of over $110 billion now, as opposed to the $80 billion we have, over $110 billion if we'd been investing in the S&P just since FY20. So this is telling you that there's a problem, and even the permanent fund's own numbers are telling you that there's a problem here.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It's number one. We're going to continue with this in the next segment. We got more coming up. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Bill says, it's too early for this. I cannot follow. Let me talk to myself, because, this is this is a lot on this chart. But essentially what it's saying is, and Brad, I think you said it was one of two things. You said it's either the legislature is overspending or the permanent fund is not earning enough. It's not, doing a good enough job earning money. I would argue that it's both. Because if we were spending less, this wouldn't be as big an issue. We still wouldn't be earning as much as we could, but this wouldn't be as big an issue. But on top of that, we're not earning as much as we could. And so the divergence between those two is pretty spectacular. But basically, Bill, for you and me who haven't had enough coffee yet today, just look at that bottom line there, the red, starting at 2025 and move outward. Every year for at least the next 10 years, it's a minimum of $500 million in the red, meaning over the next 10 years, we will draw $5 billion more from the earnings reserve than is in it. And that's the money that's going to come out of the permanent fund itself, the corpus of the fund. And so, that you, again, eating your seed corn, this is the argument they're making. And again, this just goes to show you that we are overspending and not earning enough. Both of those, Brad.
Yeah. Basically what's going on with this proposed constitutional amendment is the permanent fund sees this. The legislature may see this, although I'm not sure they've seen these numbers displayed in this way. But the Permanent Fund Corporation sees this, knows they can't sustain the 5% draw, knows that there won't be enough cash coming into the earnings reserve to sustain that 5% draw and sustain inflation proofing, statutory inflation proofing. And so they're seeing this and they're going up, can't have that. We need to sustain the 5% draw. So if we merge the two accounts together, if we merge the earnings reserve and the corpus together, we'll set up a situation where we can start drawing from the corpus to cover that gap. And no one will see that, because we've created a back door into the corpus. We no longer see those separate accounts.
That's the thing, though, Brad, right? This doesn't fix the problem. All this does is obscure the problem. The problem still remains. The problem of we're spending too much and we're not earning enough in the permanent fund, those two problems still remain. Combining the fund simply obscures the problem.
It obscures the problem, but it also creates a back door into the corpus. It obscures what's going on. The problem remains. It obscures what's going on, which is they've got a back door now into the corpus, and they start pulling the corpus down, either by rerouting the permanent funds portion of royalties, or by cashing out on appreciating assets, cashing out too early in order to generate cash to cover the 5% draw.
So I think it was Rick who asked, "Why? I mean, are you giving this to the legislature? Are you addressing the legislature with this information?" He said, "I think it would be better served there." But Brian asked the question that I asked: do you think they would actually listen? Would they actually look at this? Is all information that's readily available to them. Why aren't we talking? I mean, why aren't they talking about this as well in these kind of ways? I mean, this is pretty bleak, hard facts when you can look at this and say, okay, here's where we're going to go. And these are based on, I'm sure, the rosy numbers of the Department of Revenue and the governor's 10-year forecast and everything else. This doesn't include any major spending boons, I'm sure, like defined benefits or anything else. So,
yeah. Now let's be clear. These aren't deficit numbers. These are shortfalls in the POMV draw. These are shortfalls in the POMV draw plus inflation proofing. So
right,
it is the failure to generate revenue to support the spending that's going on.
Right. But I mean, it is a deficit in terms of we're going to be drawing from the corpus of the fund because we're not earning enough.
Right.
But it's still, again, based on the average revenue that the state is going to need. Right. I mean, so it is based on a number that is based on real, projections that have been put forward. So it's not technically a deficit, but it just shows that the problem is there. And anyway. All right, we're going to continue on to number 2 here. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Let's go.
Brad Keithley joins us every week to discuss oil, gas, and the economic forecast of Alaska. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, our guest. We're continuing on with the weekly top 3. We just finished up with a lot of numbers and colors and bars and graphs and everything else to basically tell us that we have a couple of problems. One, the permanent fund is not earning enough money. Even if it just pegged itself to the indexes, we would have made tons more money rather than whatever fancy manipulations that they're doing right now. And 2, we're obviously spending too much because if the 5% draw isn't being covered by the earnings of the fund, I mean, that's obviously a earnings problem, but we should also be cutting back on our spending to make it fit what we're actually taking in. That's the bottom line. But number 2 of the weekly top 3 is a small ante. I don't know what you mean by that, Brad. What do you mean a small ante? Hit me with it.
Well, the Senate passed a corporate law, what James Brooks describes in an article in the Beacon and in the ADN as a corporate tax update. The Senate passed it 16-4. It's on its way to the House, and it is something that I think is a small ante into the solution of our fiscal problems in the state. The update itself, the corporate tax update itself, is only generates $65 million a year at best. The range that the fiscal note gives it is somewhere between 25 million and 65 million. Even at 65 million, that's only 3% of the deficit we're running. So it's not the solution to anything. The headline says it could generate millions for dividends and services, leaving the impression that it's a big part of the solution. It's not. It only covers 3% of the deficit, but it is part of the solution. Even at 3%, it is part of the solution, and I think it's something that is important to understand and discuss. A lot of people have complained that it is a change in the corporate rate. This is not the Hillcorp loophole we're talking about. This is an entirely different statute. What this statute does is expand the definition of the corporate income tax to include companies like Amazon and others that are delivering online sales into Alaska. Right now, our definition of the corporate income tax only includes, from the standpoint of online businesses, only includes companies whose costs are largely in Alaska. It doesn't include companies whose costs are largely outside Alaska, but who do business in Alaska by delivering products into Alaska. And so Amazon's not subject to the corporate income tax. Other online sellers are not subject to the corporate income tax, a share of their profits from doing business in Alaska. They're not subject to the corporate income tax because of the way that our corporate income tax code is written. Elsewhere, as online businesses have become much more a big part of commerce, elsewhere, other states have updated their corporate income tax codes to include corporations who make sales into the state, even though their costs may be located elsewhere, even though the origin of the products may be elsewhere. They've updated the corporate income tax to include companies who make sales into their states. Alaska is operating on a prior version of a multi-state tax code that still is based on where the cost centers are. So this is an update to reflect, to come up to speed with what a lot of other states are doing, and to reflect that our corporate income tax will apply also to corporations who are doing business in Alaska through sales, not just cost, not just where they're sending the product from. Good bill, a good update, keeps us on par with what's going on in other states, and passed the Senate, as I said, 16-4. It's going over to the House. And basically what I want to say here is this is an ante into the game. This is an ante get a small ante, but nevertheless an ante into the game of getting our budget under control. I know there are advocates out there that say we're only going to be able to solve the budget by cutting spending. But Dunleavy tried that in 2019, didn't accomplish it, couldn't even get 16 to back him up in the legislature to back him up on the level of cuts that he proposed. And we've been running deficits ever since. Actually, we've been running deficits since 2013. So this is a small ante into updating the Alaska corporate code, to put us on a par with other states in terms of how we're calculating our corporate income tax. And I think it's an important thing to do. I'm concerned that there are those who are going to have a knee-jerk reaction that says tax, even though it's not an increase in tax, even though it's a tax essentially on non-resident out-of-state industries that are doing business in Alaska. I'm concerned that there are those who are going to have a knee-jerk reaction saying tax, no.
But you and I have talked about the effects of taxes, because again, this is a tax that wasn't being levied before on businesses, like you said, like Amazon, that are outside. It's, in a lot of ways, it's a hidden tax because it doesn't directly affect businesses here in the state of Alaska. But if you think that Amazon is going to just eat whatever tax increase that is in there, I mean, you and I both know that's going to be passed on to the Alaskan consumer. They're quoted in the article as saying, "Oh, this isn't a tax increase." Well, it is a tax increase because it's a tax that you haven't received before, so therefore it's an increase, and it's going to be paid by someone. And I guarantee you, the corporations that are involved are not going to just eat the cost; they'll just tack a portion onto whatever they're selling to do it, or pass it directly onto you.
Michael, in large part, what's going to happen with this tax is it's going to come out of taxes that are being paid to other states. So since Alaska is not calculating corporate income tax on this basis, other states are getting a bigger share of tax as a result of calculating it on this basis, in part because Alaska isn't. It's sort of like, when you think of it, it's the equivalent on a personal level of the Oklahoma income tax. We've got guys who come up from Oklahoma, work on the slope, non-residents here, go back to Oklahoma. And Oklahoma has an income tax. And so when they go back to Oklahoma, they're taxed on the income that isn't taxed anyplace else. if Alaska had an income tax, I'm not advocating at this point that we do, but if Alaska had an income tax, what that would do is reduce their Oklahoma income tax. It would count as tax in Alaska that would reduce the tax burden in Oklahoma. So in a lot of respects, it's not increasing the cost to the company. It's simply shifting the costs the taxes that they're paying from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. I mean, the loser in the Oklahoma income tax case is the state of Oklahoma, and right. I don't think the state of Oklahoma is going to be able to find a way to increase costs to Alaska.
But that's assuming that every state has something similar that they're already taking, and it won't be something additional. And there's no guarantee that that is the case. So in some cases, this may cause an increase, right? I mean, I'm trying to be above board and intellectually honest on this. Not every case is going to be an Oklahoma style case.
Not every case is going to be an Oklahoma style case. But this isn't a sales tax. It isn't a tax that is a tax on the sale that the company will say, okay, we're paying a 3% tax on this delivery, and so we need to increase your cost by 3%. It's a cost on the corporation, a cost of business on the corporation, and it's hard to think. I mean, what you're essentially arguing is that somehow they would do Alaska centric pricing that would charge a different rate to Alaska for the product than they're charging in other states. The underlying charge would be different to Alaska, not the charge for transportation, which is separate, not the charge for sales tax that would apply in other states. What you're essentially arguing is that they would somehow increase the underlying price.
I'm saying that they would increase the underlying price across the board, and maybe not just Alaskans would be paying it, but everybody is going to be paying it. Because if a corporation has a 3% cost increase in costs, they're not just going to eat it; it's going to go in somewhere. And so I think it's just disingenuous for folks to say it's not really a tax because we won't pay it. We probably will. Maybe in some cases we won't, but in other cases we will. I just think, again, we shouldn't soft sell it to say, don't worry, it's a net zero thing and we won't, it's free money. I think it's disingenuous to say that.
Well, we're talking about a fraction. I mean, so what you're suggesting,
right?
So what you're suggesting is somehow Amazon reflects it in its overall cost, and somehow Amazon bumps up the price slightly to cover this additional cost, or cover this additional cost in its overall price. And so the price to New Hampshire, the price to Maine, the price to Washington, the price to Illinois is all bumped up a little bit. So the fraction of cost that ultimately gets to Alaska is going to be, even in that situation, the fraction of cost that's going to get to Alaska is going to be minute.
Well, no, and I agree. I'm not saying that it's not. Here's my problem. Again, it's the disingenuousness of saying this could not cause an increase, right? Which is how they're acting. Like this couldn't be, and maybe it's a nickel, maybe it's a buck. I don't know. But again, just to say that this is not a tax is, to say this isn't a tax increase, it is a tax. It'll be minute and probably almost unfelt, but don't blow smoke up my skirt and tell me it's raining. You know what I mean? Don't tell me what it's not when it is.
This is how we never solve the problem. You and I had this had a debate about when we did the tax on e-cigarettes. I say as you take a draw on your e-cigarette. We've got to have. We are not going to cut our way out of this. I know that there are people in the chat room right now who are screaming all caps that we're going to cut our way out of this. It's not going to happen. We saw in 2019 there are too many build-up forces, even in conservative districts. There's too many build-up forces to cut our way out of this. So there's going to be revenue somewhere. Having a revenue option that accepting all of your arguments, having a revenue option that has a minute effect on Alaskans off shores, a bunch of the cost effect. Having a revenue option that does that is a hell of a lot better than a lot of other revenue options. So
again, you're missing my point. I don't disagree with you on that. What I'm saying is, Don't tell me it's one thing when it's not. That's my whole point. See, this is the problem when we start to lose trust in our leadership, is when they look in our face with a straight face and say, "Oh, this is absolutely not a tax. This is absolutely won't," and maybe it won't cost us much, but it was something. And that's the thing. That's what gets me, Brad. Not the fact that we need the revenue. I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing about anything. I'm just saying, when you look at me in the face and say this is not really a tax.
All right, let's accept that.
It is a tax. So
let's accept that for a moment. It's a hell of a lot better tax than a lot of other options.
Not disagreeing with you on that. That's what I'm saying. I'm not disagreeing on that. My point was, don't tell me it's one thing when it's not, or don't tell me it's not something when it obviously is. And that's the bigger problem, the heartache that I have with this. I don't have a problem with the overall idea of it. Yeah, everybody's going to pay it. I mean, people in New Hampshire will be paying a tax because we increased our thing. Maybe it's a nickel, maybe it's a penny, maybe it's whatever. But again, it's just the disingenuousness from these people refusing to address the actual issue, saying that they don't want to say tax. They don't want to, they are afraid to say it. They don't want to talk about it. It's always new revenue, right? Again, just call it what it is.
The actual issue is we're running huge deficits. That's the actual issue.
100%.
And the actual impact of this is to reduce those deficits in not in a huge fashion. Again, it's only 3% of the size of the deficit. The projected revenue, even at best, is only 3% of the size of the deficit.
Yeah.
But it reduces it at least some, and it reduces it in a way that, again, accepting your argument, it reduces it away in a way that has a minute impact.
Yeah, it does have a minute impact. I'm not going to disagree with any of that. Again, that wasn't my whole point. My point was, don't tell me it's something it's not when it is. Obviously, to anybody that looks at it, it's obviously that. Anyway, all right, we're going to continue. Number 3 is Dead Ahead, the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3 continues. No, I mean, of all the things that could have been done out there, definitely probably the least harmful of all things that could be done out there. But again, it's the fact that they're trying to tell us that it's not a tax. That's what gets me. Because again, it's that disingenuousness that we keep hearing, because they're refusing to acknowledge the problem, that we're spending too much. We're in deficit spending, and that so again, this is my fear. If we ever did come up with some other form of tax without any kind of controls, is that they'll just spend it all. They still won't acknowledge the problem. The problem is we're spending too much money. That's the bottom line, and they're just not acknowledging it.
Yeah, but we are spending too much money. We are running huge deficits. We've got to close those deficits. We've been closing them with the most regressive tax ever proposed in terms of PFD cuts. We've got to close them somehow. And this is in the broad range of things, that you can use to close the deficits. It is got to be one of the least burdensome, least impactful of the options.
Because it's the most broad-based. I mean, let's face it, everybody's paying. I mean, people from all over the U.S. will be paying for our little stipend for sure. So I agree with you on that. Absolutely.
What I'm concerned about is that we just have people just say, oh, it's a tax, so no. Well, how do we ever solve the problem? How are we ever going to solve the deficits? Because we are solving them through the most regressive tax ever proposed. We're solving them through PFD cuts. We're solving them by taking money out of middle and lower income Alaska right. Families, not even any other families, right? Only Alaska families. We're solving them by taking money out of their pockets. We've got to solve the situation. And okay, I will grant you it may be viewed as a tax under the circumstances that we described in the segment. I will grant you it may be viewed as a tax, but in terms of the range of taxes, it is way the hell at the far end of low impact, as you say, broad-based taxes.
Right. Well, and I guess to my whole point is, Brad, words matter, definitions matter, truth matters, right? And in showing that it is a tax and saying this is the absolute best thing we could do because it affects you the least, somebody could embrace that and acknowledge that we've got problems. That's the whole point. The point is avoidance. See, they're doing stuff for outside things that hit people outside, that it's the lowest impact stuff that nobody will see because they don't want to acknowledge, because then people might say, well, why are they taxing us? They're already getting all this money from the permanent fund. They're getting this money from royalties. They're getting this money from the dividend. Why do they need more? Right? And that might make people question what's going on. To me, it's about the avoidance of the issue more than anything else. I'm not squawking about the nickel that it might cost me on an Amazon order. I'm saying this whole thing is, don't continue to lie to me to tell me it's a sunny day when it's piss and rain all over us, right? I mean, that's what's going on. And that's what irritates me, is that they continue with a straight face to look in the camera and say, it's not a tax. We don't do taxes around here. You're taxing the hell out of us. You're taking our PFD. You've gotten all the money straight from the oil companies. You're getting all this other stuff. We are some of the most heavily taxed people in the country. We just don't see it because it's stealth. So they're continuing their stealth tax by putting it on something that's outside that we won't really even see or notice. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a fair point. But we've got to close. It's also a fair point that we got a huge deficit that's not going to go away by just magically saying we're gonna cut spending down to whatever the hell the revenues are.
Again, I'm not disagreeing with you on this. See, that's the thing. You think I'm disagreeing with you. I'm not. I'm just saying
we're violently agreeing.
I'm violently agreeing. Use truth. Don't try and deceive and obfuscate what the actual truth is. Just tell me true. Tell me like it is. You know, the thing is, again, they don't want to have this conversation, Brad, because it would expose what's going on, that the reason we have the deficits, which you are right, 100%, we must fill, we must squash. The reason we're having these deficits is because we're spending more than we take in, which at its root is a spending problem. But again, there is no political will to fix that. I'm with you 100%. I agree. We've been trying that on this program. You and I have been talking about it for 10 years. I've been talking about it for 15 years before that. There is no political will to fix that. I don't know how to. Honestly, we had this conversation last week. I have no idea how to fix that. No, I thought if we talked about it enough, people would listen. But people just don't give a crap, apparently.
Well, it's because they're not personally affected, Michael. I mean, the top 20%, the donor class, the oil companies, the non-residents aren't personally affected, aren't being affected by the deficit because they don't have to contribute to the costs. And the 80% that are affected, I mean, a lot of them are on this program. We're bitching about the costs. We're bitching about the spending because we're personally affected by it. But
right.
But the people who can actually move the needle aren't affected by it by the way we're doing it.
All right, here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew, I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. We're on to number 3, which is some good news. Brad saved the good news for last. After all the beatings that we've taken here. Now we've got some good. Brad, what is the good news? What is?
Well, I took our conversation last week at the end of the last segment last week to heart. You said maybe I should do a good news segment. I'm not sure I can come up with it every week, but at least I can come up with it some weeks. And this one's sort of backwards in the sense that the good news is it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But there is as we approach the end of this session, there is some good news out there. The first of it, I think, is that the capital budget passed the Senate, and the capital budget passed the Senate unanimously. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody was in love with spending on the capital budget, but it does mean that people recognize we need a capital budget, that there are things in this state that need a capital budget, the match with the federal government, so we can have roads. For one thing, is a huge part of that we do need a capital budget. And I think the unanimity in the Senate passing the capital budget was a recognition that it was probably the lowest cost, most efficient, least impactful capital budget that we could possibly get away with. That there was capital budget restraint, and that's good news. I mean, in the sense that it could have been worse. It could have been a huge capital budget because everybody wanted to spend, and the Senate just kept adding more and more and more and more to it. That's not what happened. What happened was the Senate had restraint on the capital budget. Additional good news, I think, out of that capital budget is that a significant part of it was paid by reappropriations. Reappropriations are where the Senate has appropriated money in prior years to various budgets or to various projects. Set the capital spending has included appropriations to those projects. The Senate has found, or the legislative body finds, that the projects are no longer needed or are not as important as using that cash for other purposes, or saving the cash by not pursuing that appropriation or that particular project, and reappropriating the money to other projects, essentially saying, we're not going to go forward with that project. We're not going to spend that on that project right now. We're going to take the money and reappropriate it to someplace that we need to spend it. So I think the recognition, otherwise that money just sits out there and somebody will find a way to spend it at some point. So reappropriating, taking back money from projects that no longer have a priority, I think is another good thing. Another good thing is that they increase the ADA dividend. ADA, the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, earns money, not as much as it should, but earns money off of various projects, or has appropriations made it to it by the legislature that are essentially capital appropriations. They're essentially part of the capital budget, if you think about it right. And that money sitting over in ADA, and the legislature in this instance, ADA normally decides what it's going to dividend back excess cash that it says it doesn't need. Well, the legislature in this case is pulling more money back from ADA. Essentially, that's a reappropriation. If you think about it that way, is a reappropriation from ADA back to the budget. So I think that's another good thing. There's increasing recognition, I think, as we get through this session, that the legislature does not want to make additional subsidies to the LNG project, the AK LNG project. If it lives, if it's able to get money from outside, great, good thing, go ahead and do it. But the legislature is not going to put any more state money in it. At least this session of the legislature is not going to put any more state money in it. And also the same on Cook Inlet gas. We're not going to subsidize Cook Inlet gas. That we found a market solution to Cook Inlet gas, and we're not going to either forgive royalties that are otherwise due, reduce royalties that are otherwise due, or subsidize Cook Inlet energy or gas solutions. So I think that's a good thing, that the legislature has gotten out of the business of subsidizing the LNG project or subsidizing Cook Inlet. Another piece of good information. Another piece, there's a headline this past week in the ADN that says Alaska lawmakers say pension reform is a 2-year project. I think recognizing that pension reform, the defined benefits, conversion to defined benefits, or recreation of defined benefits, is not something the legislature is going to accomplish this session. And I think in large part that's due to the pushback the legislature has been getting on defined benefits, the emphasis on show us a fiscal note that shows what the actual cost of this thing's going to be, and the legislature having to deal with the fact that there is a cost to it, that they can't just say there's no cost.
Right.
Similar to your no tax argument.
Right.
You can't say that there's no cost. So I think there's a bunch of good things that are coming out of the legislature, in the sense that they're not bad things, in the sense the legislature is holding back reappropriating, pulling back on the capital budget, and sort of standing on where we are, as opposed to continually expanding on that side.
This is analogous to, looking in the couch and finding all the money under the couch cushions, right? I mean, this is sweeping out all the accounts for all this money that's been sitting in these various accounts for all this time and basically been doing nothing. And the argument is, and I've talked to several people in the legislature on this, there are thousands of accounts out there with money just sitting in them that's been stagnant for years for some project that was funded 10 years ago that hasn't really gone anywhere. There's millions and millions of dollars sitting out there. We should be doing this every year.
Well, there are some reappropriations every year. I think what's going on in this one is that these were two fairly high projects. One is the Juneau Road. They're pulling back from the Juneau Road, and they're pulling back from the Port of Nome, because the feds are pulling out of the Port of Nome. So it's basically, I think it's what we're getting attention to is they're pulling back even from high profile projects, not those that have gone stale and since been forgotten. They're pulling back from high profile projects as well.
All right. Well, some good news, at least. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, and the weekly top 3. Again, no promises that he can deliver good news every week, but he's going to try. We're going to get to it. All right, Brad. Well, as always, great thought-provoking stuff. We appreciate you coming on board. Thanks for being part of it today.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got more coming up, including Chris' story at the end of the next hour, plus some of my thoughts when we return. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this. No, I mean, there's, how many accounts are sitting out there, and it just not just on the capital component of it, but on on all the components of it. I mean, how many accounts are sitting out there with $1 million here, $2 million there, 500,000 here, 10 billion here, 10 million here. I mean, pretty soon you start talking about real money, and this is part of that problem when they're supposed to be sweeping some of the accounts out that have money in them, and the stuff that's appropriated, they need to have like a reappropriation committee where they go back and look and say, have we done anything on this? There's just money sitting in this account doing nothing. If we're not going to do anything, must not have been that critical. Let's pull it back in.
To some degree, yeah, I think that's right. To some degree, this is like empty positions or unfilled positions, right? This is the capital side equivalent of unfilled positions. You got this money sitting out in the accounts that for projects that are no longer viable or certainly aren't high priority. But you don't want to pull those back because it is sort of like the money in the couch cushion. It's sort of like the savings account that no one knows about, or the checking account that no one knows about. It's money that they're sort of holding in reserve in years like this, maybe, where they're pulling it back in to help fund when oil's down or when the permanent fund isn't producing the earnings you want. Is sort of sitting out there. So you're right. Yeah. The other thing, I think there's a big thing about pulling back from ADA, making ADA dividend or having ADA dividend more than what ADA wanted a dividend. If you think about ADA, it is just another capital appropriation. It's another way of doing a capital appropriation. It's essentially giving money over to an agency that the governor controls, but you're essentially putting a bunch of money over in that organization, some of which is to be spent on specified, identified capital projects that the legislature says, here, we're giving you money to pursue this project, sort of off books or in a separate set of books. Some of it is just money that ADA's generated, earned off of projects they've been involved in and they're holding on to. But pulling that money back in, dividending that money back into the general fund, which is where it originally came from back in the day, I think is a good thing also. So as you think about these reappropes and pulling money back in from projects that are dead, you ought to think about, is the money that we've given ADA for the projects that they're pursuing, is that more important than having the money back in the general fund
Right.
to either close the deficit, help close the deficit, or pay for the capital spending that we need to do that has a higher priority currently.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, It's not just Frank just said, well, hey, a lot of that's federal money. If we take it back, the federal government will demand something. I'm not talking about draining stuff out of, federal matches or anything else, but there's tons of money out there that the state just put into funds. And it's not all about capital or construction. There are monies in different accounts out there. I can't remember who told me this, that they had started looking at this. It is billions of dollars. There's billions of dollars in the various accounts out there that could potentially be swept back in if we really were serious about it. But of course, they won't even cut unfilled positions. So, that have been vacant for 10 years. They won't even cut those. Do you think they're really going to want to go through and sweep money out of all these accounts? They may need that money one day for a rainy day. They may want to spend it on something else.
Yeah, or a project or a capital budget they want to pursue for certain reasons.
Exactly.
So they keep it sitting out there.
Yeah, holding it in reserve for that day when they need to be the hero or whatever. About 2.5 minutes here, Brad. So what do you think happens today if the veto, which I think is going to happen, it's not going to be overridden, it's going to stand? What do you project for the rest of this session? Or you think that they're going to try and the governor's got his proposal in there? Do you think that's going to go anywhere? Or do you think we're looking at a special session? What are you thinking?
Well, we may be looking at a special session for the budget. There's still a deficit in the budget, and I take the Senate at its word that it wants to hang on to a 2575 PFD, and so at a 2575 PFD, there's still going to be a deficit, even if you reduce the BSA from the $1,000 that's in the current House operating bill down to $680 or $650 or whatever the heck that number was we used last year. You still have a deficit. So there may be a deficit. There may be a special session on the deficit. I don't think, unless the governor really just wants to flail this horse to death, I don't think there's going to be a special session on education. People are getting exhausted by the issue, and it's not making any progress. And
Right.
it's not a must-have in the sense that the budget is. You can't end a session unless you have a budget signed by the governor.
Right.
So it's not a must-have. And it can be papered over again with another, one-time contribution to the BSA, and try it again next year. And I think that's where we end up. The governor has a bill out there. Maybe people will talk about it, but I don't think there's enough time left in the session to pass it. And I really hope we don't go to a special session on that, because I'm not sure it's an ever-ending special session.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure exactly what happens, even though there was I think it was Himshoot who proposed the original big increase, said, well, I could look at the governor's proposal. It might work. I don't know. It's all pie in the sky at this point. We'll have to see where it goes. All right, Brad. Well, thank you for coming on board and sharing all this with us today and arguing with us. I appreciate that. I think it's fun. Iron sharpens iron, baby. That's what it's all about. So we all understand where we're coming from. Thank you for coming on board, Brad. As always, it's good to talk with you, my friend.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. All right, we got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Hour 2 is dead ahead. You're home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's do this thing. Hour 2 right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the program. It is hour 2 of the big radio broadcast, and we are ready to go. Just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets and the weekly top 3. Got a little spicy in there. I love that. We're having some conversations about deficits and taxes and everything else, and it was a great conversation. If you missed it, you can go back and listen to it on the podcast, which is available wherever you find podcasts, including our favorite, which of course is Spotify. All right. So hour 2 of the big radio show, finishing up in this hour, we'll be talking with Chris Story, the man from Homer, who's going to give us a little dose of positivity, because that's how we like to finish out our week, is with just a little bit of positive, or our day, I guess, a little bit of positive, because we just got all the bad news from Brad, and now we need a little bit of dose of that positive just to get it. It's not bad news, it's just truth, and that's the problem is that it's just truth. And unfortunately, we have a whole bunch of people who are literally living in denial in this state. And Brad and I got into a little bit of an argument there in the last segment about, and the thing was, I think that he was, I think he finally came around to my point, but he was missing my point. That not that I was disagreeing with him that we need to fix the deficits, that we need to address it, and we should be doing everything we can to fix most of this stuff. But the bottom line is that this is an issue that is primarily made and sourced from the fact that we don't have that we don't have any fiscal discipline, that we have a spending problem, and that is really the key here, is that we have a spending problem, and that we are failing to address that at every level. Now, I agree with Brad that there is no political will to cut the size and scope of government. That doesn't mean we're going to stop talking about it. But we have to acknowledge, as we fight this battle, we have to acknowledge that right now, with the current team that we have, the current members, the current players, that there is no will to actually cut the size and scope of government. I mean, we just saw this. We just saw this when we tried to, once again, for the second time or the third time in the last 2 or 3 years, where we've attempted to reduce and defund unfilled positions, right? And what they call empty PCNs, which are funded but unfilled positions. And in this last case, they were positions that have been vacant for, I believe, 2 or 3 years already. And, it's not much, it's $1 million, it's $5 million, it's, 15 million. Last year, in one case, it would have saved us like $54 million in unfunded positions. And so, but in the large scheme of things, when we're talking about a $5 or $6 billion budget, that's not a lot. But it's something. But when you can't even get the current batch of critters to even agree on that, Brad's right. There is no political will to cut. And that's a challenge. And on top of that, you've got the bureaucratic pushback, right? So you've got the bureaucracies who are in there, who are used to getting all this money and using all this money, and they're going to stonewall, and they're going to fight, and they're going to put up whatever stumbling blocks they can in the meanwhile to stop that as well, because they're protecting their own little turfs at the same time. And so you've got this kind of perfect storm of lack of accountability and kind of laissez-faire attitude by our current legislative leaders, and and a bureaucracy on top of it that is just entrenched and abusive, And so the answer is, how do we fix it? I just don't know. I just don't know. We could create all kinds of new revenue. We could do different forms of taxation, whether it's a flat tax or fair tax or employment tax or head tax or sales tax or whatever tax we want to talk about. We could do all those things, but without any kind of change in modus operandi for the legislature, without any kind of change of habit force, that won't matter. Because again, it's Parkinson's principle for basically for government, that spending will expand to consume all available money supply. So sure, we want to, for those of you who are out there talking about, well, the oil companies, we're getting screwed. It could be another $1 billion a year. And okay, it could be. Let's just say hypothetically, you're 100% correct. I don't believe it's quite that much. I do think that we're leaving $500 million on the table, though. But I mean, but let's just say it's $1 billion. What do you think would happen to that money if we changed all the oil structures and nothing else? It was all sunshine and roses, and we got that extra $1 billion. What would happen next? Based on what's gone on over the last 25 years, what do you think would happen next? Would we be able to save ourselves? Would we be able to fix this deficit? Or would they spend all that money and more? Be intellectually honest with yourself for a minute and answer me that question. If we came up, and maybe it's not oil taxes, maybe it's a sales tax, or maybe it's something else. Maybe we just give up the rest of the dividend. Or maybe we do taxes and give up the dividend. Maybe we do a new oil tax and give up the dividend. So now we're at $1.5 or $2 billion in additional revenue. So what do you think happens then? Tell me true. Would we then suddenly discover the fiscal discipline to live within our means? If suddenly a windfall came from the sky and fell into our lap, would we all of a sudden discover the advantages and the virtues of fiscal discipline? I find that highly unlikely. Past performance is indicative of future results. I think that they would spend all of that money and more. I mean, we had Natasha von Imhoff 2 or 3 years ago, when in her final year in the legislature, when we had that 1 year where there was a windfall, and going back to Brad's chart, I think it was 21, 22, when all of a sudden we had a bumper crop in oil pricing, and all of a sudden we had all this money that was kind of unexpected. And her comment was, we have all this money, we just don't, we got so much, we don't know how to spend it all. That's indicative of a larger problem. Just if the money is there, they are going to spend it, because the base state of this whole deal is that all that money is there to be spent, not to be returned to the people, not to be put away for a rainy day, not to be, utilized or given back to the people in a way that they can spend it. None of that matters. It all becomes about protection of the state, protectionism of the government economy, again, protecting their own little fiefdoms, and making sure that whatever dollar they can get, they can spend it on something for somebody else to consolidate their power and be the hero and do all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't matter, just again, to Brad's point of we've got to deal with the deficit. Yes, But dealing with the deficit by raising more revenue, and this is why I get so chapped when I hear some Republican or supposedly conservative politician talking about, well, we need to generate more resource revenue. I mean, that's wrong on two different parts. One, the fact that we're even talking about generating more revenue for the state, because tell me, is that really going to fill the hole? Is that really going to fill that gaping hole in the center of government where they just want to spend it all? Secondly, the fact that they're trying to talk about resource, which is again a very, very long tail for most of this stuff to actually start to see revenue. 5 to 10 years in most cases before we start to see it, and we've got a problem now. Everybody is afraid to use the magic word, cuts. Now, again, I'm not kidding myself. There is no will to fix that. We'll still talk about it on the program. We're still going to have discussions just like this one. But the bottom line is that there is no will to actually have that conversation. And they are so averse to it that even when they're trying to fill the deficit by creating new taxes, they refuse to even call it a tax. The Bill Wielechowski said passing the bill, his bill on this corporate income tax thing that Brad was talking about, passing the bill is a step toward resolving a major budget deficit, he said, adding that the change won't have an impact on Alaska and isn't a tax increase. On who? It is a tax increase on someone. Now, maybe it's a shuffle, as Brad was talking about. There is some truth to that in the Oklahoma type, situation, but it won't be for everyone. Someone will be, it'll be a tax increase for some business somewhere. They don't even want to talk about it. The majority, the House majority, got up on the floor and talked about how we haven't proposed any new taxes. So even they're afraid to talk about taxes because they don't want to point out the fact that they're already taking all this money. They're already getting all the royalties, all the fees, all the property taxes and everything else that they're getting. Plus, they're taking a huge chunk of your 2/3 of your dividend. And so if they start talking about even more taxes, somebody might say, well, wait, you're getting all of this. And what's going on? Somebody might start squawking. Somebody might start asking questions. And again, they don't want to offend their donor class, who may have to pay some of that as well. I just want us to be real. I want us to be really intellectually honest with ourselves and say, we understand that the political will to actually make the cuts to government is not there. Again, it's not an argument to stop talking about it. It's that we need to start looking at alternatives. How do we address it if we can't get the cuts? Now, again, I don't have the answers to that because I've been trying for one way for 25 years to make this happen, to try and bring attention to it. I've tried my way, and obviously it's not working. So maybe it's time we crowdsourced this and some other folks come up with some ideas on this, because this is just madness, folks. Now we're about to talk about the new education bill that the governor put out, and there's some interesting comments on this. And I want to get back to that here in the next segment, but we are up against the break. And so we're going to have to go to that, and then we'll come back. And we'll talk about this education override, the veto, which is going on today. The override vote is going to happen today. Do I think it's going to get overridden? My answer is no. I will be very surprised if it's overridden. If it is, well, that has its positives in some ways as well. And we'll talk about that as well. It's all coming back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, fine. Harold's not wrong. Harold says, stop the growth of government spending. You should have tried to stop the next high tide. I mean, right? That's what it feels like. Melissa says, districts would be smart to get behind the governor's education bill. I mean, yeah, something is better than nothing at this point. If I hear one more little blurb about how we're not failing, we're starving. If I hear one more thing about that, I'm going to lose my chiz. I'm just going to, the cheese is going to slide right off my cracker. When I was asking the question of what would happen if a windfall fell from the sky, what would happen? And Matt says, we would spend it like a teenager who found their rich daddy's credit card. Yeah, no, I agree. That's exactly what would happen. You know, they would immediately start spending it. They would immediately find some program that they needed to create or something. Yeah. Terry says they will spend every cent. They spend more is what happens if that money came down like that. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what would go on. More. Right. It's exactly right, Kim. More. It's exactly what they would be doing. They'd be screaming for more. And that's the nature of government. I mean, this is not a secret. This is in the history of all written history. Every government is more, right? Whether it was the French crown borrowing money from the English or the English borrowing from somebody else or land barons or so. I mean, whatever it is, it was always more. More wars have been started over poor fiscal policy than anything else in this. And it's always about more. It's never about austerity. It's never about living within your means. It's never about any kind of humble leanings or any of that. It's always about more. That's what it's all about. What are we going to do? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did. But I just don't. Again, Harold's right. It's like trying to stop the tide. It is the frog and the scorpion. Why do you sting me? It is my nature. Why do you sting me? Now we will both die. Because it is my nature. I mean, we're on a self-destructive path. Harold says, thinking that leaving Alaska is a good idea. Follow the kiddos. And you know what? There'll be a lot of people that are with Harold on that 100%. That, you know, in the long run, and people go, well, but is it any better out there? I don't know, but it can't hardly get any worse here. At least, in fact, I had a guy tell me, this is 10 years ago. I had a friend of mine who was like, he was leaving to, where was he going? I don't even remember. It was someplace in the South. And I was like, you think it's going to be any better there? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, I just do know that where I'm going, if I lose my job or the money runs out or whatever, and I can't afford to pay my electric bill, at least I won't die. I was like, well, I guess that's one way to look at it. If I don't pay my electric bill, I won't die. But, because I was trying to convince him to stay in the state. I mean, this is going to be okay. It'll be okay. Maybe he had the right idea. I don't know. I don't know. Especially those who are approaching the age of retirement with a known fixed income. It might be better to go somewhere else, which is just tragic. Tragic to think. All right. We got to go. Let's get back to it here. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do this thing.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Okay. We are continuing now our discussion about what's happening today. We are the governor's veto is going to be in the spotlight today as the legislature is set to meet to vote on whether to override his veto of the $1,000 BSA increase. All the odds are on the fact that the governor's veto does not get overridden. That's where, if all the betting people are out there right now, the odds are basically saying, no, it won't get overridden. But what does that mean? Now, first and foremost, what if it did get overridden? Are there any positives there? Well, I mean, I guess there'd be an end to the griping and bitching about it, I guess. That would be one positive. It would no longer be the bone of contention and sucking up all the oxygen in the room in the next session. I guess that would be the positive. Although I think based on what we're seeing right now, they're acting like, well, this is just the beginning. 1,000 is the minimum that we need. We'll be back next year for more. Right? I mean, that's kind of the implication that we're seeing right now. So if by some strange stretch of the imagination it does get overridden today, that would be the case. But the bottom line is, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that veto is going to get overridden. So that leaves us with the question. The governor has proposed his own draft education bill, which contains a $560 BSA increase, along with a handful of other funding things for homeschooling and reading incentives and some other stuff. And again, it's into the BSA, so it's an automatic increase every year. It's an automatic payment every year. That increase would now be baked into the formula, which I guess is a win for them, right? Instead of it being one-time funding, because the other option is to just do another $680 one-time funding boost per student, which is what they did last year with that one-time $175 million payment. So that really, how many options are on the table here? There's not a lot. But you could see already that they are trying to pony up and rally the troops and get things squared away to even begin next year. One of the quotes in here is, Tom Claymire, the president of the NEA. He was in there saying, oh, this is work. He said that if this override effort fails, he said that legislators should return to negotiating in earnest to get a bill that can pass. But again, they were all about making sure that they get that $1,000. And again, no real reason why they given for the Senate to pull. Even Claymire said, it was interesting because even Claymire said that the policies that were put into the previous bill that the Senate stripped out before they passed it, that had been put in by the House, the things the governor said that he wanted in the bill, even Claymire said that the union supported the policies that were previously in the education measure. So why exactly are they doing it? Is it to set up a battle for 2026? Or is it, as Rob Myers said, a way for them to reset the clock on this and reset the debate and start at that lower number without being the ones? Maybe that way, maybe they're not the ones to drop it below $1,000. Maybe there is politics involved, right? You don't want to be the politician that voted down and reduced that $1,000 payment down to the 680 level. So your answer is to hand grenade the whole thing and then have to start fresh. And then you can get to that 680 level without actually saying, I had to vote against $1,000. Again, it's all politics. It's all politics in that regard. But it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. It's a joke to say we want better outcomes, so we're giving you less money, says Elise Galvin. It's a joke to say we want better outcomes, but we're giving you less money. You guys are getting more money than, almost any other state in the nation. We're in the top, tippity top. In 2015, we were at the very top. And yet our outcomes have continued to be in the bottom, which tells me this is not a money issue. This is some kind of process issue. You've had the most money of any student or state in the union, and you still couldn't deliver. If I hear the quote one more time about how we're not failing, we're starving, that's complete and utter BS. They have had gobs of money. Now, if you can't manage it properly, if you as a school district or as a school board can't manage your fiduciary responsibility properly, is that our problem? I guess it is, because it's public education, so the public is responsible for it ultimately. But shouldn't we be outraged and shaking the pitchforks and torches and asking, what did you do? Isn't that what we should be doing? Asking that question? And then I saw the comment from Rebecca Himshoot, who is the Sitka representative who was the lead sponsor in the $1,000 BSA bill, right? She was the one that wrote the whole thing to begin with. When talking about the governor's new proposed increase of $560 instead of $1,000, she said that the governor's education measure contains proposals that, quote, that we can definitely work with, unquote. Now, that's either one of the most encouraging things I've ever heard or one of the most ominous things I've ever heard. All I could think of is that we can definitely work with that kind of thing. It's like the base, or we can work with. I don't know how to read that. But it also reminds me of the negotiating tactics of we want it all when we would have been happy with half, right? So here we are at half, and maybe she's saying, oh, this is all going to be good. She said she was encouraged that Dunleavy was now proposing an increase to the BSA after he proposed an education measure in January without one. I think at that point he was just talking about a one-time funding thing. And I think here's the thing, they've worn everybody down. They have worn everyone down, even Shower and some of these other guys. Well, I think we could use, BSA increase, but it has to be. It could have just been one time again. And I think they're just getting wore out. They don't want to have to face this debate every year. And maybe that's what happens. Maybe we get a $560 increase because then next year, at least they don't have to, maybe it'll be a couple years before they come back again. But again, nobody is asking the big question. What did you guys do with all the money? And why are you in fiscal crisis when you've known that the state, that one, The state is in a fiscal mess, and they probably are not going to have a secure source of funding for the next 10 years. That's not been a secret. That's been in the governor's 10-year plan since Dunleavy took office. You knew there was going to be tough times ahead fiscally. You knew that your enrollment was declining, which is a big component in the factor thing. You knew these things were going on, and yet you still plan budgets as if Uncle Sugar is always going to be there to bail you out. Why aren't we talking about things like zero-based budgeting? Why aren't we talking about some of these other things that could go to, why aren't we talking about fiscal stability? How in the world are we allowing our school districts to spend one-time funding money on reoccurring costs? I'm talking about like with the COVID funds. When the federal government was very clear, the grantor offices and all the oversight people were like, now don't spend this on reoccurring costs. This is just a one-time money that you're going to get for a couple of years and then it's gone. So don't spend it on reoccurring. And what did some of them do? Like the Anchorage School District? Oh, well, technically, we didn't spend it on one time. What we did was we took the reoccurring money that we would have spent on our teachers, and we spent that on the one-time cost. And then we took the COVID money and we used it, for. I mean, it's a shell game. You spent the money on reoccurring costs. That's what you did. You took one-time money that was your own that you were going to spend on a project and instead put that towards teacher salaries and then took it's not going to, this is what happens when you mismanage. We're $17 million in the hole. We're $20 million. We're $100 million in the hole. You knew it was coming. This is not rockets. You could see it. But again, nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about how they knew it, they planned it, they could see it, because it's not palatable, because they don't want to be the bad guys. Same thing on the state side. Nobody wants to talk about the overspending because they'll be the bad guys if they say, well, we just can't spend that anymore. They don't want to be the bad guys. Sometimes you got to be the bad guy. It's like being a parent. I want it. No. I'm sorry, you can't have the toy or the cookie or whatever it is. Sometimes you got to be the adult in the room. Unfortunately, we don't have legislators with that kind of backbone or spirit. It's unfortunate. It's just the truth. All right. I'm going to get Chris Story on here in just a second. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, let's see if we can get this thing going on here. Where is the man, the myth, the legend? In his own mind. All right, let's see if this thing works. See if this thing works. Look at that. My God, it worked the first time every time.
Beautiful. Good morning. How's it going?
First time every time. It worked just fine. Good, my friend.
60% of the time.
Yeah, first time, 60% of the time. 60% of the time, it works every time. How are you doing? What's going on, my friend? What's life like for you?
Michael, I just, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I just want to say I woke up on top of the world.
That was it. And just the risk of sounding super arrogant, I am the best there is. That's what it sounded like you just said.
No, if I was going to go that route, I'd pull out the old quote that it's my humility that makes me great. But no, I just very happy this morning, and it's inextricable. I don't know why. Because normally when I wake up on Tuesday mornings, like, oh God, I got to talk to Dukes. And but this morning, I I actually forgot about it until just now. No, I'm just kidding.
Just
No, I look forward to it each Tuesday morning. That's part of my day.
It's my humility that makes me I'm still laughing about that. That is fantastic. I got to remember that. I'm going to get the t-shirt. But it's my humility that makes me great. All right, Mr. Story, what is the theme of today? What is the theme for today? What's going on?
Anti-paranoia.
Anti-paranoia. Okay.
That's a hook, huh?
That is. It's interesting. All right. Anti-paranoia. What do you think is going to happen today in the legislature with all the education and everything else? Where are you at? Give me your thoughts.
It's interesting that you discuss the BSA and I hear you talking about the budget and the statewide fiscal cliffs and everything that's going on. And I got to just say, when people are asking me about how it's going with the Fair Tax Act reform and property tax, and are you sure you want to do a ballot initiative and not just send it down to Juneau and see if somebody could get it through the House and then through conference? It's like, please, we can't tie our shoes legislatively. I mean, it's just, I don't know what to think, Michael. It's honestly just, I don't know why it has to be so difficult to, have a consensus of adults that recognize
maybe we
state of reality.
Yeah, maybe we should live within our means. I mean, that's a unique concept, but I mean, maybe we should do that. I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm excited about the ballot. I'm not excited, I should say, about the ballot proposition standpoint of having to collect, 20-something, 30-something thousand signatures. But again, you send something to Juneau, even a good idea. It's sort of like the old expression about meetings are a place for good ideas to die. And that's what I think about legislation these days. Is I just don't understand it. Somebody called my show the other day, or called me after the show, and said, why, in the age of Zoom, why do we have to pay legislators, the reps and senators, to go to Juneau, move all their household stuff down there, pay them per diem, pay them to be there away from it? Why don't most of the session be done via Zoom? You ever thought about that?
Yeah. It was funny because I actually had this conversation with Fran Ulmer probably 20 years ago on the program. We were talking about Juneau and how remote it is, and how difficult it is. She goes, "Oh, we've got all these great technologies now that you can call in, you could telephone, you can watch all that stuff, you could see it. It's like you're there, and you could be part of your government and all that." And I said, "Well, why don't we use the same type of technology for the legislators and just have them in the various?" "Oh, we couldn't do that." "Why not?" "Oh, because they've got to. It's good enough for you, but it's not good enough for us." And I still remember that conversation. I'm just like, but I mean, if it's good for us and it's supposed to be good enough for us, why shouldn't it be good enough for you? And you're right. Why couldn't we have Zoom meetings and all this other kind of? But yeah, I mean, it.
I remember going down as part of a realtor delegation, because we do a lot of lobbying on behalf of property owners, not for ourselves. And we went to see our newly elected senator, and he couldn't see us, so we met with his assistant. And then we come to find out he was signing headshots to be given out on the floor that day to the people that were coming to visit. And I thought, oh, okay, this could have been an email. Like, this is
Right.
not necessary.
Right. This is okay. I see. More important to sign headshots than meet with us, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's gonna work out just fine. And that's when you realize that the vast majority of politicians are, sociopathic. That's when you just realize that they're just they're just in it for the fame and the glory and the look at me. That's what that's what a lot of them are in there for right now. So anyway, okay. So again, paranoia. What was it again?
Anti-paranoia.
Anti-paranoia. That's the name of the game today. Anti-paranoia. Okay. I'm a little paranoid about what you're going to talk about. All right, here we go. Let's get back to it. Chris Story is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Let's do this thing.
Chris Story, the obnoxiously positive and sometimes hilarious man from Homer, joins us every week to talk about pottery, positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. We're looking at you, Eric. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Yeah, how not to become a nihilist. That's That's important life advice there. That is important life advice. Chris Story, the man from Homer, joins us. You can find him at ilovehomeralaska.com. He's got full width and breadth of all of his works there, his books, his podcasts, his writings, his musings, and everything else at ilovehomeralaska.com. He joins us every week to give us a dose of positivity. And today he's here to talk with us about paranoia. Or no, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. I'm a little paranoid about that. Anti-paranoia. Although I don't know, paranoia can be a good thing. I mean, maybe they really are out to get you. Chris, what do we got today?
Anti-paranoia, exactly, is the opposite. It is they're not coming for you. No one is coming for you. And when you get to grip on that and you have full understanding of this anti-paranoia concept, life gets better. They aren't coming. No one is coming for you. Jim Rohn said success leaves clues, but rarely interrupts you sitting on the couch. You have to go after it. The life you're meant to live isn't chasing you. It is not going to chase you. The life you're meant to live, the life on purpose, and whatever you define as the good life, you've got to build a path towards it, and then you have to walk or run or jog towards it. But they're not coming for you.
But they're coming to take me away. I heard that the other day.
Those are your friends. Those are your friends.
Okay.
They can be in white coats.
All right.
They're
I'm
your
sorry.
friends.
All right.
Just go to them to the padded room,
Yeah.
Michael. You'll be fine. But and life got better for me when I accepted that, because I fully wanted to be in everything I've done. I had this ideal of, oh, this is going to be amazing. This is, and like, you, not unless you do it. No one's coming for you to put you on the radio, Chris. Nobody's coming for you. The HarperCollins is not going to knock on your door and say, hey, I know you haven't written or published anything yet, but we think we see something in you, and we'd really like to offer you a 7-figure advance, buddy. How about that? No, not coming for you. Not coming for you, Chris. You got to get out there and self-publish, pal. And I wouldn't trade it for anything now. I love it. But I had to go build that path for myself against all odds, because, there's, again, I have no reason, nothing exceptional about me. I just decided that's what I wanted to do. It's a path that I wanted to walk on, and I am doing that every day now, and absolutely love it.
That's an interesting concept. Basically anti-paranoia means they're not coming to get you, so you better pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and do the deal. I mean, and I think it's almost a misnomer, because paranoia is they're coming to get you in a negative way. You're trying to spin it to say in a positive way. Nobody's going to hand you a silver platter with $1 million check on it at your door. Publishers Clearinghouse is not doing that anymore. So you best go out there and hustle, right? Is that what you're saying?
And ironically, Ed McMahon, may he rest in peace, died broke, actually worse than broke. He died in massive debt and left in a state of debt for his family, which is very sad. But you're the one that brought up Publishers Clearinghouse, not me.
Yeah.
But okay, so I listened to an interview recently with Stephen Pressfield, and he wrote famously Legend of Bagger Vance, which became a great movie with Matt Damon and Will Smith prior to Slap Heard Around the World, and lots of other books, Gates of Fire. I mean, he's written a tremendous number of fiction works, including, though, a whole repertoire of books for artists and writers and would-be poets and people. Most famously, it's called The War of Art, which is sort of, kind of a fun twist of Sun Tzu's book. But it's a great book. But he said in this recent interview, he goes, look, man, I was 52 years old before I finished my first novel or published my first novel. Everything else I'd done up to that point was crap. He had just been working and working and working. And he goes, now I'll listen to some 30-somethings complain about, oh, I haven't made it yet. And he goes, you're a child. You've got a lot of life to live. Go live your life and build a life that you want to live, no matter what else happens. So there's just this path or design of your own life, but it's something you've got to build, because, again, they're not coming for you. Rarely does success interrupt you.
It's interesting sidebar for a second here. He was 52 before he really wrote his first book. I mean, I think Harlan Sanders was 57 when he first started hawking the idea of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah.
And I think
66 actually.
or 66. I think Ray Kroc was in his middle to late years when he started. I mean, so it's funny that we get it, and I think it's a sign of the times and the technology, and everybody's looking for the flash in the pan. And I'm 25 and I haven't accomplished all that. I'm 30 and I haven't accomplished all this stuff. It's like it's the Instagram generation where they just expect immediate success and immediate fame and fortune. And when you look at it historically, most of these people haven't really hit it until their, late 40s, early 50s, sometimes into their 60s before they really, really start. I mean, you've told the story of Oscar. He didn't really hit it till he was later in life as well, right? I mean, your mentor. I mean, there's tons
built
of stories.
his first house at 55. He said,
Yeah.
I built my first house at 55, and I met him when he was 85. And he goes, and they haven't caught me yet.
Right.
I wrote this down this morning in my journal. I wanted to share this with you. I wrote down, purpose doesn't shout, it whispers. And I thought, that's interesting. I don't know where that line came from, but purpose doesn't shout, it whispers. And I guess the intonation is there that you're the only one that can hear it. You've got to be listening to hear that sense of purpose for yourself. And then again, you're the one that's got to build the road. You got to build the path that you're going to trod down, and only you can do that. And just like I say, it made a really big impression in my own life when I came to the conclusion, they're not coming for me. No one's coming for me. I've got to make something happen for myself if I'm going to.
I think Anthony is complaining about the same thing that I'm thinking. He says, I'm not sure we're using paranoia in the right context here. We're talking about anti-complacency in this regard. And I would agree. I think Chris is trying to, again,
hold on. Who does he work with? Who's he working for? Who sent you, Anthony? Who sent him?
Now you're a little paranoid, right? I mean, but you're right. I mean, this is about not just waiting around for success to find you, because it's not going to happen, right? I mean, you've got to have a plan. You've got to work the plan. You got to go out there and what's the thing? Opportunity knocks, but you got to be in the room to hear it, or whatever it is, this thing. I mean, that's the thing. You've got to be ready for it. You've got to be prepared. If you're saying it's not a shout, but a whisper, you've got to be listening. You got to take your headphones off and unplug from the TV, or stop doing whatever you're doing. Stop yelling and screaming to hear that whisper. It does rely on us to be ready for when those things come.
Daniel Coyle, a fellow Homerite, wrote a great book called The Talent Code, and then a companion to it called The Little Book of Talent. Both I recommend being in your library. But he talks in there story after story of people who you might know, names you might know, but also a lot of athletes and people that maybe you've never heard of, but their stories building from nothing to something. And rarely did somebody come and pluck them out of a crowd and say, hey, you've got what it takes to be an incredible pianist or violinist or athlete. You've got to be doing the work, and you've got to be, like I say, following your own path and putting in, it's been overused, but the 10,000 hours. You've got to put in the time to build a life of purpose and or build a talent with which then you can launch into another phase of life. We're almost halfway through the year, right? We're coming up on the end of April. Before you know it, you and I are going to be celebrating Memorial Day, and then you're going to, oh my goodness, the year's half over. Have I made progress towards my goals? Wait a minute, have I set goals for 2025? Did I put them in ink? Did I really intend on accomplishing something? And now the year's slipping through my fingers. And yet, if whatever it is, they are not coming to get you. They're not coming to say, hey, don't forget to practice the cello. Don't forget to write your book. Don't forget to build your business. Don't forget to better yourself or improve yourself or read the book or whatever it is. You've got to set that path for yourself, and just be careful that this year doesn't slip through your fingers that much further, finding you that much further from where you wanted to be than when you started the year.
About 3 minutes left. Chris Story is our guest. ilovehomeralaska.com is where you find him on the web. Chris, so how did you apply this to your own life? I mean, you said that, you started to embrace this. How long ago was that? I mean, was this early on that you discovered that, they weren't coming for you, that you had to, what was it?
Ironically, your opening talked about pottery and positivity. Well, it was in my pottery career. I really wanted to have just a nationwide reputation as an artist. And I realized Ceramic Monthly wasn't coming for me to do an expose on me. No major company was going to put me in the MoMA. There was nothing that I could do. There's nothing that it was going to happen if I didn't do it. So I took the reins immediately and I started contacting gig companies. And I did the first real awakening was when I went after a show at Nordstrom. No potter that I know in my world had ever done a show at Nordstrom in the department store. And I thought, this is what I want to do. And I have no reason to expect it, but I pushed and pushed and pushed. And finally, about 4 months later, the woman in charge of doing what they call trunk shows said, you know what? Okay, let's do it. And I put on a show up there at Nordstrom, and I thought, there you go. And I ended up getting, I think, about a half a dozen stores saw my work there and picked me up. And I was like, because I pushed, Nordstrom wasn't coming for me. No, nobody was coming for me. I had to go out there and make it happen. And that's how we ended up in about 75 gift shops in 8 states because we pushed and pushed and put ourselves out there. And then it started to roll like a snowball downhill and build momentum. And so that's going back to about 1995. So it's been coming up on 30 years of practicing that idea. With Anthony's permission, I'll say it again, anti-paranoia.
Yeah, it's pursuit, right? You're pursuing it instead of it. It's not pursuing you. You need to pursue it and have a goal and go.
No one's ever chased me.
Yeah.
Except the clown one time, but that was,
the FBI.
I took his red balloon.
FBI would like to talk to you after the show today. So it'll be fun.
Yeah,
again. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you, my friend, for coming on board and joining us as always. Great positivity from you, and I appreciate you in so many ways. Thank you for being part of it today.
Absolutely. A lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, folks, we got more coming up tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll see you then. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. That's my exhortation to you. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Okay. We will see you guys tomorrow. 66 years old. Brian says there's still hope for me. Yes, my friends, there's still hope for all of us. I mean, we can all make a major life change. I did. And do I regret it? Not a minute. Is it scary? Scary as shit. It's scary. But it's something that we got to do sometimes. You got to stretch. You got to go. Always be reaching for something more. That's what we need to be doing. All right, my friends. Well, it's the end of this day. We're ready to go. We will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day. Love you guys. We'll see you.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.